So this whole conversation is reminding me of one of your articles where you state part of unlearning toxic monogamy and dating in polyamorous spaces, there needs to be a divorce from our expectations around other people's time, bodies, and responses. So can you define toxic monogamy, and what would be your advice to someone entering a polyamorous space?
Okay, so toxic monogamy is when you go to like your local clothing store and you see a shirt that says "Stay away from my man or I'll cut you." You know,
Yeah.
um, there's this idea that like as long as we're defending what we view as ours, like our property, and by property I mean our romantic relationship, that everything is fine. You know that any manner of negativity is okay. That like I don't do it it's been a while since I've done it, but I used to like post under the hashtag monogamy so fragile on my Facebook page, because it was just a showcase of people doing things that are abusive or controlling, but we find it funny because they're just defending their relationship. Like I saw a wedding ring that had married stitched on the inside, like engraved on the inside. So if you take off the ring, it's still embedded on the finger. You know,
That's some trust right there. Oh my God.
there was an episode of like Steve Harvey's talk show where a woman explained that like when her husband goes out by himself, she takes out a Sharpie, signs his dick, takes a picture of the signature, and then when he gets home, she compares her picture to the signature.
Oh my
Because
God.
if it's too smudged or messed up, then she knows that he's cheating. Like there's all these sorts of really bananas ways that we try to defend our relationships, when really, like, why are we doing this? Like why are we subjecting ourselves to this kind of nonsense? I like the idea of divorcing ourselves from the entitlement of expectations. I was in a relationship a bunch of years ago, and I apologize if I tell a lot of stories.
Oh, we love it. We love it.
I was with somebody who was super busy, where like she had like 2 grad school majors and 2 jobs and like 5 partners, and I'd only really get to see her like once a semester. But like I really enjoyed the time that we spent when we spent it. But just missing this person the way that I was, or wanting to spend more time, I got into a really negative space about it, and we ended up breaking up. Now, not too long after that, I ended up meeting somebody else who I had a really amazing chemistry with, and they were just as busy. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to make a 5-year plan here. You know, I'm not going to. The only thing I'm going to commit to here is I'm going to try to spend time with this person. It's going to be awesome when we do, and that's it. That's the entirety of the commitment that I was making, and that was 7 years ago, and me and this person are still on great terms, and I try to see them when I can. It's awesome when we do, and that's it. Like they've gone and got married, they've moved a couple of times. I've been in different relationships and so on and so forth. But when we see each other, it's still awesome. It's still love when we see each other, and that's it. You know, I don't feel like if they don't have time for me on a day, or if they've got to cancel on me, or if I don't get to see them for a little while, like my world is ending, or that I don't get a chance at love. Like, no, it's just next time, and that's fine too. You know.
Yeah, definitely. I as you're sharing this, you know, there are people that I've been in relationship with that the course of our relationship shifted over the course of like 3 years. So I remember this one particular gentleman who was my first Latin lover, became one of my best friends, me and my husband's best friends. And my husband let me go over a weekend trip with him to a local music festival. I like could not believe I was being granted this kind of freedom. Like, did he know what we were going to do? We were going to fully, I was like, okay, cool. This is amazing. And I will say we've never had another weekend since then. It was like that weekend at the same different festival was like our lovership weekend. And then over the course of that year, it was like, that was like the most extreme experience we ever got to have. But after that, you know, we would have these maybe sexually intimate experiences, but they started to lessen over the course of 3 years. And literally a year and a half ago, he met this woman who's his now soon to be like fiance, and he's in a different space. And like, this is still I would consider someone that's one of my, I mean, he's in my community, and it's like a friendship. This is one of my friends who's just like, we've been lovers at times. We've had times where we've like not been in lovership with each other. And kind of going back to what you shared earlier about like the demystifying some of the, like what poly isn't, right?
Yeah.
It's not sex. So what is it? It's real relationships, friendships, this
It's connection.
bonding, connection. Yeah. That like it goes in, I think with each individual relationship ebbs and flows. And the way that my husband and I have been poly over the course of the last 5 years has never looked the same at one point over time.
Yeah.
Like if I look at the last 5 years, not one season were we doing it the same way. And that goes the same with all of my lovers and friends that I engage with in a polyamorous community with, that those are fluid as well.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that you talk about, you know, in like a heteronormative, or not heteronormative per se, but that there's this rejection culture between that can happen where, you know, like where women have to have their guard up when turning someone down. And I've certainly experienced, as a polyamorous and queer woman, this experience of really navigating the quote unquote turning someone down conversation. And it's been beautiful because some of those conversations have actually been for the friendship. Like, I want to pause this part of our relationship at the moment because I feel like we can actually support each other in this capacity instead, trying to make it be a positive transmutation of the relationship, not an ending of something, but just a transmutation of it.
Yeah, and that's sort of the magic of consensual non-monogamy for me, where it doesn't have to look the same way at the same time. Like I've got a friend where at some point, like I expressed an interest in her, and I was like, hey, you know, if you ever want to date, you ever want to fool around, I'm interested. And she's like, you know what, I'm good. And I was fine. But then, like, we would still see each other. We still see each other, hang out, watch movies, and so on. And then, like, next thing you know, we're hanging out, watching a movie, and she takes my hand and puts it directly on her crotch. And I was like, oh, all right, we're doing this now. That's fine. And then, like, when we would get together, that's what our relationship was. Like, we'd get together, you know, hang out, eat food, watch movies, fool around. And then she ended up, like, getting really tied into this guy she was seeing. And so that aspect of our relationship went away. But we'd still hang out and still spend time when we could. And, like, just the idea that, like, just being able to take the rejection makes people feel wildly safe, you know. I've been in hookups, I've been in relationships, I've had friends where they just tell me, you know what, I was really into this guy, but I was sick the day we were supposed to go out, or I was just really tired after work, or my kids were doing too much, or whatever it is, I had to cancel the date, and he flipped out so much that I decided I didn't want to do this anymore, you know. I've had people tell me that they called me because I was chill when they had to cancel on me. So when they had to cancel on the other person and he flipped out, they called me instead. You know, like I've had that conversation where there are websites dedicated to it. There are message boards. There are subreddits dedicated to like text messages of somebody saying, "Hi, I'm interested in you. Sorry, I gotta go." You know, like I'm not interested, and then flipping out. Well, you're fat and ugly and terrible anyway. I was never interested in you in the first place.
Right.
Like, when that's the culture, you know, people have a right to feel unsafe or skittish about having those rejection conversations. People don't delve enough into their own emotional literacy. People just want to lash out. And again, like part of this is because they feel like they're losing a lifetime's worth of companionship all in one moment, you know?
Yeah, it's so well said. And, you're really speaking to consent, right? So, in our friend group, we're all really educated in sex positivity and consent, right? So if somebody approaches you and you're not interested, a simple no thank you is all it takes, and you're not going to get flack for it. And it does create this safety container in our friend group that I don't experience with people that aren't really well versed in consent. And it's a shame that people have to live outside of that paradigm, because it really does create safety.
Like oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I've 100% had people turn me down, and I've 100% had people turn me down, and I was really, whatever about it, like, no big deal, thanks for taking care of yourself, only for that person to hit me up sometime later and say, like, hey, if you're still interested, I am now interested. That turnaround has happened enough times, and I've heard about what happens when it doesn't. I've heard about why that turnaround doesn't happen for other people in the same way that I've had it turn around for me.
Mm-hmm. So there was one, quote or specific thing on your website that really we wanted to bring in, because you're really an expert on this topic and something you're really passionate about. And what it said is you're an expert in unpacking the way that racism and systematic oppression of Black and brown people affects the way that we date and become intimate. Can you really let's lean into that. Can you educate us and break it down for us how race and dating and polyamory all intersect?
I mean, a lot of us, like in non-monogamous communities, we like to think ourselves as like, really open-minded, really, really welcoming. But then, like, when you bring up, like, hey, but how many people of color have you dated in your dating career? And people get real quiet at that. Like, people want to host a potluck. People want to host a happy hour, a movie night. And then when you look around and notice that there aren't any people of color, any Black people specifically, people get real quiet about that. That's sort of how I got my start. Like, I live in the Philadelphia area. Philadelphia, depending on which census year you're looking at, can be anywhere between like 40 and 45% Black. So when I would go to events in the Philadelphia area and find myself as one of very few, sometimes the only Black person there, I started getting loud about it. I started pointing it out. Like, it wasn't something I was quiet about, and it's because I'm about to turn 44. I know what happens if I don't say anything. If I don't say anything, somebody's going to say, oh, yeah, no, we have Black people here all the time. And then they look at me because I'm the one guy who's there,
Right.
I know that if I go to an event, I know the photographer is going to find me, and I'm going to be all over the website, for next year's event to show that their diversity is there. So I'm never quiet about it, because somebody has to speak up about it. And it's always sort of a balancing act, because you want to point it out, but you want to point it out in a way that allows you to still maintain a presence in the space if that's the thing that you want. Some people don't, and that's also okay. But like, just the same things that impact racism on a systemic level, the same things that impact racism, or that sort of create racism everywhere else, it doesn't stop at the door when it comes to polyamory communities. Like, I've been to places where somebody was into me because I'm Black and not because I'm Kevin, and I've always got to do that math in my head and figure out, like, what someone is saying versus what I'm hearing. Sometimes there's a dog whistle there. Sometimes there's a microaggression there, and I got to pick up on all of that. There's always somebody that wants to, like, bring up race in a way that I'm not bringing up race. Where I've been to events where, like, the conversation could be about video games, and someone's like, "Oh, but what about Black people?" And, like, as if I was supposed to teach a class about it. Like.
Right.
One of the saddest stories that I heard is an event organizer for an event that I would go to on a yearly basis was telling me about it, how they had hosted something, and it was like a weekend event and everything was great. They were having a good time, and somebody was like, "How does it feel being the only Mexican person here?" And it was something that he hadn't thought about all weekend. And then all of a sudden now he's a man apart from this thing that had brought him so much community and fellowship before, you know?
Yeah.
And like a lot of times it's not coming from a malicious place, but whether it's coming from a malicious place or not, it hits. It hits and it makes you feel unwelcome and distant real fast. And so I started talking about that. And talking about it led to writing about it, which led to the book Love's Not Colorblind. And just putting it into words and using more stories than just my own about the way people can get fetishized, the way people can get othered in these spaces, you know, and just sort of the white supremacist root of all of that, you know. It doesn't just stop at the door of non-monogamy. A lot of it is like these dating preferences, like the way people form attractions. In a lot of ways, is based on gut reaction, and those gut reactions are based on societal standards, you know, societal modeling. So, like the person that's like, oh well, I don't date black people. There's something about them that there's something going on inside them that makes them feel like black people are unworthy. Like if you can like look at, say, the cast of Black Panther and just not find anybody attractive in that cast, there's something going on.
There's something wrong with you. Yeah,
like,
there's something off.
Yeah, like it's not the cast. They're all beautiful. No. You've got something going on with you that you should like figure out, that you should confront, because it's not just. It doesn't just limit itself to your dating, you know? Like that same thing that makes you that makes you feel like people are unworthy of dating for whatever reason, that's going to impact your friendships. That's going to impact the people that you work with. That's going to impact, you know, like I've got people in my life where we're cool, we're acquaintances, but if I'm in a jam, these are the people that I'm not going to call, and I know that about them, you know? But those folks, they're like, oh yeah, my friend Kev's my buddy. Kev's not your buddy when Kev's not your buddy in the clutch, you know?
Right.
And because that's something that's going to come up not just in your dating record, but also in the other aspects of your life. I'm not saying go out and date black people just to prove that you date black people. I'm saying you should examine where your attractions are coming from. You should examine what's going on there so that you know that about yourself. Even if you have to try to, like, you know, I'm not telling you to, you know, villainize yourself. Just figure out what's going on with your mindset there. Because, like, if you see yourself as somebody who you know is worldly and loves everybody, you know, I don't have a bone of hatred in my body, but your bookshelf doesn't have any black authors, you know, but your Netflix queue doesn't have any shows containing like black protagonists, you know, You're not as progressive on that matter as you think you are, and you really should think about that, because there's something else going on there that you don't want to impact the other elements of your life.
Well said.
Oh wow, so well put.
Thank you.
I had an experience. Have you ever heard of Burning Man?
I have friends that go to Burning Man.
Yeah, you've been to Burning Man?
No, I've got friends. Yeah, including my.
Oh, you've got friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went for the first time in 2019, and some of the philosophy of Burning Man is really, you know, it's burning the man, right? Like political, and it really is. It's a possible society of what could be possible if you took out politics, religion, race, all of that. You know, sexual orientation, all of that. And it was the first time where I realized how much society has impacted, like, the way that I think about things. And I actually was able to sit with it. And I said, God, if I was able to dismantle that, what do I really think? What do I really feel? What do I really want? And I think that you really just said that so eloquently, and to really take a look at, you know, and be honest with yourself about those things. And that was, yeah. And it's insidious.
Everybody wants to think of themselves in the best terms ever. Everyone wants to be the hero of their own story. And I get it. I'm the same way. We're all the same way in that regard. But every once in a while, you've got to look and see, like, wait a minute, am I perpetuating something negative here? Is there something negative that pushes me forward that holds somebody else back? You know, like I'm a cisgender dude. There's like my trans friends deal with shit that I don't even have to think about on a daily basis, and I've got to keep my mind on that kind of stuff because they do. You know, I don't want to get a leg up on trans people just because I'm not trans. And being a man in America, I don't want to get a leg up on women just because I'm a man. You know, I want to get a leg up because I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I've got to be mindful of those kind of things in the same way. And I hope that non-black people, I hope that white folks are being as mindful about that stuff as I've got to be when it comes to like the points of oppression that I don't inhabit.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And I think that there's been a huge, do you feel like there has been progress in that with Black Lives Matter and things like that, or what's your honest take?
I don't know, honestly. I remember when Barack Obama was running for president, I remember hearing about a Ku Klux Klan leader talking about we should all go out and vote for this Obama guy. Because if we get a black president, the real racism gets started. And we immediately got Trump, you know? After 2 terms of like an Ivy League educated, well-spoken, overly qualified, personable person, we got a YouTube comment we got a YouTube comment section in a toupee, you know? And that to me is amazing, you know? Like the turnaround on that was so stark, and like they actually want him to come back and run for president again after being impeached and after like causing a riot in the nation's capital. They want him to come back. It's hard for me to say yes, there's been all sorts of progress when that still exists, you know?
Right.
There's this wonderful photo at some protest, and it's scary that I don't even know which one because there's so many. It was just like an old lady holding up a sign that said like, I fought the Nazis. I can't believe I've got to be, I can't believe that in 2022 I'm still fighting this shit. I'm in my 40s. It's scary to me to think that I might be in my 70s or 80s holding up that same sign.
Yeah. That's powerful.
Well, if history tells you anything, I don't know if everything bubbling to the surface is progress, but that is what's happened, right?
I mean, it's bubbling, and we'll see when it simmers down. We'll see what's left in the pan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting to be talking about this because I was born and raised in Los Angeles. So, I grew up in a very Jewish community. I'm Jewish. I kind of just thought everyone was Jewish. Like I grew up in a very safe Jewish bubble.
Yeah.
That it wasn't till I would like leave LA and there were no Jewish people they educate you very young about the Holocaust when you're a Jew in Hebrew school, just a thing. And, it was really interesting. I went to a high school where the prom king and queen were like a gay couple or a lesbian couple like every year. I'm a millennial, so I feel like growing up in LA and growing up in like sort of the, more modern times. Like I didn't graduate high school that long ago. I think I graduated high school like 10 years ago. So 2012. It's actually not like 10 years ago. I think it's almost exactly 10 years ago. So, but I was my senior year of high school, and actually, I've never shared this on the show before. It's just never come up, but here I go. I was part of an anti-Semitic hate crime that happened on my campus. There was a graffiti of swastikas, and there was graffiti in the entrance of the school that said top three. So I made the top three Jew rats. And me and this other very popular girl in school were on there, and then this boy. And wow. I just remember it was so intense. I mean, there were camera crews on campus, like interviewing the principal. Like these kids got expelled. They got in a lot of trouble. It was like all over the news. And I was like in this state of shock for a minute about it because I'd never experienced an anti-Semitic act by myself, partially because I grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood. I grew up in like the Beverly Hills of the Valley.
Yeah.
So like every person, it was like if you weren't Jewish, you were a minority in that town. That to have that happen, it actually caused me to like really want to go back to Israel and understand my Judaism for myself. And of course, just being called like a Jew rat, that was like kind of burned into my brain.
But you're in the top 3 of, like,
yeah, I made the top 3 Jew rats.
What does that even mean?
Is that a compliment or is that a negative?
And that's what I like kind of was like joking about with her, like, cause it was really awkward. And we were like, we made the list, we were kind of trying to play it cool, but I think we were really freaked out that this had happened. And and it's interesting. I mean, I'm really getting vulnerable here. Over the years as an adult, though, that stayed with me. And sometimes I would look in the mirror and look at my nose a certain way and be like, oh my God, do I look like a Jew rat? And so those words, they kind of branded me for a couple of years after that experience. And it just made me feel grateful for growing up in a community where I got to be around people that were my culture. But also, and I traveled a lot around the world, so I got to be immersed in I got to go to like every continent by the time I was like 12 because of my dad's job. But it also made me really afraid to leave that bubble and go into the world and now I've come out as like a queer woman. And, I even notice in my communities as an adult that, so big transition from anti-Semitism to being queer. I get that. But what I notice is like, having to own that, because it's not like you would necessarily know I'm Jewish, right? You wouldn't necessarily know I'm queer unless I were to say that. Yeah. And so I've found that I've had to just really be proud of it and remind people, because I do find myself falling into these very heteronormative dynamics when I'm in non-monogamous communities, which looks like a straight man who's poly hitting on me, relating to me like I'm a straight woman. There's nothing that triggers me more at this moment in time in my life than that interaction. And I get to become more graceful with how I interact with that energy and get to just really take ownership of, this is who I am, and inspire a space of maybe curiosity for what that's like. But I expect the world to stop interacting with me like a straight woman. I present very femme, you know? I look like a she, her, if that's even okay to say at this point in time, I don't know. But I do. And so I can't be mad at people like, oh, you're hitting on me, you're a man, like, fuck you. Like, I get it, right? But being able to stand for that and say, hey, just so you know, I'm actually really interested in this. This is who I am. I'm a queer woman, right? And owning that as easily as I'm able to own and tell people that I'm Jewish and own that side of who I am. That's so ingrained in me.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing that, Madison. That's you really got vulnerable there. Yeah. I've never talked about that on the show before. It's wild. Well, Kevin, oh my gosh, it's in your vulnerable. It's in your clearing, Kevin. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. I want to ask you something that we ask a lot of our guests, and I'm very excited to hear your answer to this. What makes you feel empowered, and what do you do to stay in your pleasure in a daily, weekly, monthly way?
What makes me feel empowered is just being around the right people. Being around the right people. Sometimes the right people is just me by myself. A lot of times it's me. It's my kids. My dad is still. My kids are tweens now, and like dad
tweens.
Dad is still a jungle gym, and we still have a good time hanging out and everything. My partners make me feel like I know what I'm doing. I feel like I can armor myself in their confidence in me, and hopefully they can armor themselves in my confidence for them. Just being around the right people, because I've been around the wrong people before. Like even people that I've loved, even people that I've been in relationships with. Like I've had partners who felt like they needed to like take me down a peg. I've had partners who felt like me writing books or being on podcasts was me doing too much, and so on and so forth. Like, just having people that want to prop me up, and also who I can learn from and who can tell me when I'm doing something wrong, but in a way that's not like an accusation.
That's amazing. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to come. We were talking before, he came straight from a pool party with his kids to be here with us. He's on a whole other coast. Thank you for the man that you are. Being willing to have these conversations in the way that you do. The world really needs more men like you.
I'm really trying my best. Thank you.
Yeah. And just your courage and the fact that, I think you said it best, like, to be willing to be loud, because these conversations need to be had in this way. And we really appreciate you educating us today and really just dismantling, what some people would consider taboo. That's why we have this whole podcast, is to have these conversations for people. And we just really, really appreciate you and the way that you were able to have this conversation with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So Kevin, you do have a lot of incredible resources. You have a book. You also have a course, Unfuck Your Polyamory, and a ton of other fantastic articles and resources. What is the best way for people to stay in touch with you, to get connected to the resources that you have? What's the best way for people to follow you?
Well, I'm Poly Role Models on everything. I'm Poly Role Models on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. My website is kevinapatterson.com, and I do a lot of work. With Dr. Liz Powell, who was a Burning Man attendee.
Ooh.
Yeah, Dr. Liz and I teach a class called Unfuck Your Polyamory. We've got a 6-week course that's pay what you can, pay as you go on our website, unfuckyourpolyamory.com. We're currently working on pro-level courses for people with relationship coaches, therapists, mental health workers, anyone who might have a polyamorous clientele. We're working on that. And myself and Alana Phelan, the polyamorous librarian, we've got a series of queer polyamorous superhero novels called For Hire. And Alana and I we're working on the next several books, but we've currently got 3 For Hire books now. So if you're into queer polyamorous superhero stuff, it's all prose, no drawings on this one. But if you're into superhero fiction, that's a good place to start.
Ooh, that sounds like something I could definitely be into.
So
yeah, I love that. So again, thank you so much, Kevin. Clitorati, we hope this conversation made as big a difference for you as it did for us. I'm sure it did. Go and follow Kevin, take advantage of his incredible resources, and we will see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.